Another major projection in regards to the White Sox 2023 record was made recently, and it's the worst one I have seen so far. There are few White Sox players that will benefit from the shift being banned, but the biggest offseason acquisition, Andrew Benintendi, is at the top of the list. And how close did we get to losing Jason Benetti to another team? His recent contract negotiations sounded anything but smooth.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on today to get started. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong die-hard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTV. Hey, really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk off-season White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The deal got done, but Jason Benetti might have been calling games for the Atlanta Braves in 2023. Andrew Benintendi is a proven left fielder, which is a big deal, but he's also a lefty, which is a huge deal this year, and more projections to make you go crazy. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox, back up to 5 episodes very soon, as pitchers and catchers will be reporting in about a week, less than. Hoping to kick things off next week with a very special guest on Monday. Don't want to jinx it, but hopefully that works out. It'll be a great episode. Appreciate you passing this podcast along to other White Sox fans in your life as the season inches closer. And again, get those questions in for next week's mailbag Wednesday, lockedonsox@gmail.com. And a lot of the comments we went through in the previous episode for Mailbag Wednesday, a lot of stuff I've been getting, and I know you've been talking about this, all about, how are you feeling about this season? It's been something we've been talking about all week on Locked On. I know other podcasts and, other newspapers, magazines, websites, blogs, everybody is starting to get their projections, their predictions out, and that will continue throughout spring training. And then, right before the season starts, you'll get some of the big outlets to give you, their division winners and who's going to win the pennant, who's going to win the World Series, playoff teams, all that kind of stuff. Everybody's got a different take on it, and there's no wrong answer. I mean, there's some that are bizarre. There's one that we're going to talk about in a moment here that I cannot believe how low the win total is projected here for 2023. I mean, I know things were really bad in 2022 and this offseason was horrible, but I can't believe what I saw. And where did this all stem from? I would say, gosh, when did fantasy baseball become a thing? 25, 30 years ago, more than that. Everybody's a GM, and you could go onto different websites now and you can figure out like, well, what would be a good trade, and is it equal value for both teams? And you can project and predict and find different algorithms for all different kinds of things. And there's going to be some wild projections, I think. And we read some stuff on, in more of a paragraph form, not necessarily, numbers and win totals. The FanDuel had that at 83.5, but more of, here's why things can go right. Here's why the White Sox can bounce back. And here's also why they might be sellers at the trade deadline. Again, it's super early for that, but of course, folks need content right now here in the dead of winter as we're waiting for spring training to start. So the latest, I don't know if you saw this, through FanGraphs, the zip projections came out just recently, and they're going through the AL first and AL Central. These zip projections have the White Sox finishing third and with a record of 74 and 88. That would be 7 games worse than last year's 81 and 81, 9.5 games worse, which is not possible, but let's just say roughly 9 to 10 worse than what FanDuel was putting the Sox at. This is the worst I've seen, but these zip projections have been around. I know people swear by FanGraphs, and there's all these different, it's alphabet soup trying to understand all these different metrics and how they weight these projections and, all the different stats that come into play. And it's tough to figure out the White Sox because of what happened to them last year. So many injuries, and it's tough to project. Well, you don't even really know what you're getting out of certain guys. We really don't know what the ceiling could be for Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, and you've got, obviously Michael Kopech, and is Giolito going to have the bounce back year? Moncada, where are you? Show up, please. And Grandal, of course. So this is what Zips had to say. And you can read all about this. It goes into great detail on how they figure out these projections. This is what Zips had to say and regarding the White Sox. And they're not completely wrong, but 74 with this algorithm, whatever they do, and they put the numbers in, and depending on, how different players are projected, I think 74 is low. But this is what they said. We've written so much about the White Sox that I don't want to belabor the point, but the organization has been treading water, watching baseball swim on by. Andrew Benintendi is fine, but adding him is basically making the minimal effort. The Pale Hose can take the Central, but it's hard to call them a favorite these days. I'm shocked how far Chicago's projection has drifted downward, but the team's depth remains shockingly shallow in a lot of areas. In terms of the next 26 roster, Zips actually ranks the Sox below the Royals or Tigers. So you can't really argue with anything said in there. The Sox have been treading water offseason after offseason, letting other teams get what they need and then trying to pick from the scrap heap, trying to get trades done without really any assets, in the farm system to get that happening. Andrew Benintendi mentioned, and a lot of folks mentioning Andrew Benintendi. Look, you got that one right. You finally figured out a left fielder to play left field. Imagine that. He's a lefty. We're going to talk a little bit more in this episode of why that's important with all the new rules in effect this season. But 74 wins, to each their own. And I, again, you could read all about how FanGraphs, if you want to, how they do this. Zips projected the Sox winning 88 games last year in 2022. But again, tons of injuries and just some crazy years from guys. The home run totals alone across the board, just so low. Power numbers were not there. A lot of things went horribly wrong. So again, that's where we're trying. We're being told by the front office, buy into this return to accustomed levels. We want you to buy into health and the hope and the, everything magical can be happening. If everything happens at once, this could be a really fun year, which I think it can be. But again, just going off of hope is difficult. However, I just can't see 74. I can't see it that bad. So read all about it on the Zips, on their FanGraphs site. Big explanation on how the projections were created. For me, it's absolutely mind-numbing. I mean, this is like the stuff that Jason Benetti, a guy we'll talk about later in this episode, loves discussing. I wonder sometimes if Steve Stone understands what in the world he's spitting out there. And it's sometimes too much for me as a fan, personally. I can't handle all of these, like percentage that he's barreled up different pitches, and the batting average of a player when he puts a ball in play. And again, not all of them are super complicated, but boy, to just wrap your head around all of that, and then talk about the pitchers with all the metrics and all of the numbers you have, tunneling and spin rate and all that stuff. It's becoming more of a language, though. I get that. When you're a fan. And it's a language that I think Pedro Grifol and his staff are trying to bring to this ball club, get them to understand that, buy into it, and figure out how to really get the most out of your potential by using some of these terms. You can throw out predictions. I love getting predictions. Send me your predictions, your projections, your whatever you've got. If you've got predictions, though, on a win-loss total, or if you've got certain projections, man, you got to have thick skin to put it out in public, because people will come at you with their take and why you are wrong, or maybe why you are right, which isn't so bad. But I'm trying to skew on the positive side, and that has not gone over well with a lot of folks. I get it. It's been a negative, very difficult off season, but man, I got to think it's better than 74 wins. I missed this from the mailbag yesterday. It came in a little bit late, but I wanted to get to it instead of waiting all the way next week. This was from Tyler, mailbag comment and question. Thank you, Tyler. So Tyler said, I think the F rating the White Sox got was harsh. I think they should have received a D, which still isn't great. The Sox did address one need by getting Benintendi. Vaughn, in my opinion, can produce at the same level as Abreu did last year. And if Eloy stays healthy for between 130, 140 games, I think he's a 35 to 40 home run and 100-plus RBI guy. And I like those projections. I like those numbers. Again, the big health with Eloy Jimenez. Boy, if he could play 140 games, I think we would really see his true potential if he stays at DH, I think. And Vaughn replacing Abreu, well, the front office banked on it. That was the plan, I feel, years ago. And it's not like Abreu had crazy numbers last year power-wise. But Vaughn playing his natural position at first base, his back stays right. And he feels like, if he starts off on slow, treading, it's going to be, I think he's going to have some challenges, because I think everybody's going to point the finger and say, you were supposed to be the second Jose Abreu, who was the second Paul Konerko. What's happened to you? We let Abreu walk for this. I think it's important for Vaughn to get off, in the right fashion. And then Tyler said, asked if there was no Clevenger investigation going on, would the Sox still get an F? I don't think so. I think the grade would be much higher if there was no drama, no issues with Clevenger. And I think you can argue that the Benintendi signing at least gives the Sox a D or D minus, but now we're just splitting hairs. I mean, really, what's the difference there? I think Grandal and Sheets will definitely benefit from the shift being banned. Hopefully Moncada too, and Andrew Benintendi could be coming to the Southsiders at just the right time. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they're the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with this no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. Over under on the Super Bowl right now, I think, is about 50.5. And this bizarre bet here, if you want to throw some money at something, it's plus 8,000. Any quarterback passing over 500.5 yards, which would be a Super Bowl record. Check that out. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockdown to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So Andrew Benintendi, could he be the difference maker? He is a proven left fielder. He's got the lefty bat, checks the boxes in those situations. Hopefully some power returns in a supposed to be a hitter-friendly in a hitter-friendly ballpark. Will his hand be okay? He dealt with some hand issues. There was an article written in the Daily Herald by Scott Greger highlighting Benintendi's excitement. And Scott Greger says, one of the lone bright spots of the offseason, which I would agree, could banning the shift make Benintendi's season even more intriguing. And this is what Benintendi had to say kind of around, how this could work out in his favor. I'm a left-handed hitter. I like the no shift rule, Benintendi said. You've got 5 guys on that right side sometimes, and it's tough to get a hit when you hit that way. Last year, I had shortstop wide open every time, so I would try to fillet one over there. Now I feel like I can put the ball and turn on it, which I think will help my power come back. Everybody's got nasty stuff, Benintendi said. The pitching is so good where maybe you'll get a little bit more offense now. I think in the end it will help the game a little bit. Under the shift ban, Greger wrote, the third baseman and shortstop have to stay on the left side of second base with both feet on the dirt. The second baseman and first baseman have to stay on the right side and also stay off the outfield turf. We covered some of the details in the previous episode, but that's another good point. You got to keep those feet in the infield dirt, or at least in front of that white line if it's AstroTurf. These steps are designed to improve pace of play, increase action, and reduce injuries, all of which are goals that have overwhelming support among our fans, MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred said in a statement. And this is from MLB Trade Rumors regarding Benintendi. This was around the time that he was signed. Over the past 4 seasons, Benintendi has posted a combined 276, 345, 417 batting line with 35 home runs and 27 steals. He's always been tough to strike out, but never more so than in 2022 when he fanned in just 14.8% of his plate appearances. It's possible Benintendi took a more conservative, contact-oriented approach that resulted both in him hitting fewer home runs, but also putting the ball in play with more frequency. Regardless, the lack of punch-outs likely appealed to the White Sox club that posted the 7th lowest strikeout rate in all of baseball last year and watched as the Guardians won the AL Central with by far the game's lowest strikeout rate. I think the shift will definitely help Benintendi. Of course, I like what he said about, instead of thinking too much of where I could maybe skew this baseball to the left side, now I can just really focus on, squaring something up and getting back to that power swing. Grandal, of course, is going to benefit. And he said so much in articles this past offseason. No more swinging for the fences when he's down in the count or maybe late in the game, thinking this is the only way I can help out this offense. Just kind of staying true, just putting a normal swing and letting that ball go to the right side with fewer fielders over there. And I think Gavin Sheets will. Gavin Sheets is going to benefit too from this. How Gavin Sheets plays, where he plays, when he plays, it's going to be very interesting how Pedro Grifol uses him in different situations. Eloy Jimenez, not going to be terribly happy, I guess, if he's the full-time DH, and I'm sure he will be not happy trying to platoon with Sheets, depending on what kind of arm is on the mound. So if Sheets doesn't win that right field position. And I'm not saying if Colas wins, he might not be playing every single game anyway. They might be platooning. Sheets is going to see some action, I think, still in right field and definitely DH. Jason Benetti went into some details about his recent contract negotiations with the White Sox. I'm going to tell you why it was such an ordeal. More on that in a moment. So I'm a little late to talking about this on the Locked On Sox podcast. This information came out, I think, last week. We knew Jason Benetti and Steve Stone signed their contract. That was something we were talking about all off season long. I personally really thought that was it. I thought Jason Benetti was going to walk, go somewhere else, and same thing with Steve Stone. Benetti has become somebody that I just feel like he can do every type of game, every sport. He's being picked up by national audiences, and it just seems to be a matter of time. But they got a deal done, and Stone and Benetti are returning. I think they play off each other really well. I think it's a bright spot to the off season. Now, some information came out, some details. I don't know if you saw this article in the Sun Times I was reading. It was by Jeff Agrest. And the title of the article, Jason Benetti on White Sox contract talks, it was kind of a pain. He was very open and honest. I'm shocked at how open and honest he was about these negotiations. So this is what Benetti had to say. The really good news is we got somewhere good. It was kind of a pain, really. There were some things that we had to get through that I thought were silly, and I'm sure they thought some of the stuff that I was talking about might have been silly, but we got there in the end. According to Agrest, had they not, other teams were ready to pounce. According to sources, the Braves were watching Benetti's situation after losing longtime voice Chip Caray to the St. Louis Cardinals. But there was a disconnect during negotiations. Brooks Boyer, the Sox senior vice president in charge of revenue and marketing, saw the talks differently. Surprise, surprise. I don't think there were any complications to it, Boyer said. It really wasn't much of a negotiation because we had picked up the option. It was just ironing out how we put his national schedule in our local schedule. So there really wasn't anything that sticks out that was bothersome to me. I guess the biggest topic in the talks, according to Agrest, initially was Benintendi's new national schedule with Fox. He'll call his first slate of MLB games for the network this season, and that will take him off Sox local broadcast for a number of Saturdays. In the fall, Benintendi figures to miss some games to call college football on Fox. I'll be honest, there were points where I was really frustrated, Benintendi said, because I think the work has been strong and I appreciate the heck out of the fans. And I have loved the Sox for all my life. I just thought it would be easier. But just because it wasn't easier doesn't mean it didn't get done. Where I have put myself totally, honestly, the place I am is we got it done. And that means something. It means both sides wanted it to happen. So look, I have no idea the details, the true details of what went on during these negotiations, why they lasted as long as they lasted. But you can kind of see both sides to it, right? Jason Benetti's like, hey, you could see the fan approval. I mean, people love me. They want me here. I'm being asked all over the place to do national stuff. I'm a wanted commodity. And, your ratings, the ratings were probably up on NBC Sports Chicago, despite, how bad the team was. I don't know that for sure. But Benetti's like, come on, like this is a slam dunk. I'm a hometown Sox fan. This should work. We've got great rapport, Stone and I. And I could see what the Sox are saying. It's like, look, like you're being torn in so many different directions. You're now calling for Fox. Last year he was doing, I think, Peacock Sunday baseball games. So he was gone on Sundays. I don't know if he's still doing that, but now he's also going to do Fox national games. So he might not be there at all on Saturday or Sunday, which, maybe, viewership, especially on a Saturday night, might be high. So I could see the Sox being like, look, you got to pick a lane here. And it's difficult to navigate around your national schedule. And you also want to be here doing your hometown team. I can really see Benetti leaving for a national spotlight eventually. I mean, he's not going to stick around for 25 plus years like Hawk did. He's going to want the bigger and better things, bigger, spotlight. And the money obviously is going to come calling. And he's not going to, I just don't think he's going to stick around and do White Sox games for a very long time. There's too many folks that want his services. But deal got done, like he said, and we've got Benetti and Stone in the booth this season very soon. Very, very soon, 50 days, something like that. Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcast. We're on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and get your questions in, or your projections or your predictions. I promise I'll be gentle, to each their own with those projections and predictions, no matter if it's 74 like Fangraphs or 95, 97 wins. I want to hear it. No wrong answers. Get those in at lockedonsox@gmail.com. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Now make your second listen. The Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I'm just crossing my fingers that we've got a special guest. It's lined up right now. Hopefully all goes well. I don't want to jinx it, but we're in for a real treat on the next episode as we start previewing what spring training and Pedro Griffol's first run at things is going to look like. Really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.